The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
In the RCMP, I think international policing is a very, very important area that the RCMP in Canada gains so much from. And I think a lot of people don't recognize the value added there. It builds a number of different relationships, and it allows Canada to contribute to other police agencies and that. The advantage that I had was after Kosovo, I had the opportunity to serve twice in Afghanistan on 2 different tours in Afghanistan, once with the European Union police mission, and then the second time as the Canadian commander of all Canadian police assets and programs in Afghanistan. And the first years that I was in Afghanistan with the Europeans was challenging because it was in transition. This was in 2008, 2009, and the country was always transitionning, depending on who was in command and what NATO command was there and what their objective was. The war was going on, the insurgency was going on. And in all of that, you're trying to build a police agency, or you're trying to improve and build a modern police service that's ethical, that's void of corruption, that practices modern police techniques, bearing in mind that they don't have the equipment or the legislation in place to say be compared to Canada or the US or to a European model. But the principles, the core principles of policing was what was trying to be delivered. A lot different than in Kosovo when there was no fighting going on. There was criminal activity going on. But in Afghanistan, when you're dealing with suicide bombing attacks, the soldiers were actually in combat or doing combat operations. So it was a whole different environment to try and operate, and really the civilian police, the Afghan National Police, there was more police officers being killed than there were Afghan military personnel being killed because they were on the front line. Same as in Canada, the police are in the communities, the military are more in their barracks, and then they go and do different operations. So it was different, and I found the second time when I went back to Afghanistan, there had been a lot of improvements, but still an awful lot of things hadn't improved to the level that we would expect in Canada. And I always thought that it depended on how you measured it. If you measured it from an Afghan perspective, we had achieved very, very significant progress in a lot of areas. If you measured it in Canadian terms, we didn't make very much progress at all. So it depended on how you measured it, and I think some of the challenges over there was the West trying to import policing practices that just didn't fit with that culture, with their legislation, with their laws, with the people's expectations. So we were trying to create a police agency or a police service model after a European model or model after a Canadian or a North American model, rather than trying to deliver the principles of policing and good policing. And I think that's, in most international operations. I think that's the real challenge for the management or the leadership of the UN or the European Union or bilateral engagement by Canada and other countries to help build a police service or an agency, to help them build what they need, not tell them what they need to have built. I've certainly admired an awful lot of people, like in the historical perspective, like commissioners, French and MacLeod and Sam Steele and others, Fitzgerald, and more recent people who have really influenced me. A number of constables that I work with influenced me. A number of corporals that I worked for influenced me. A vast number of officers and NCOs, that have influenced me, and in my approach to policing and my approach to life. But I haven't modeled myself after anybody or seen that I've followed in anybody's footsteps. But I do think that there's so much opportunity in the RCMP, and I'd hate to see us set aside for monetary reasons or for expedience to give up some of the opportunities that we've had. And over the years, we've made decisions in the RCMP through necessity to accommodate the realities of economics. But I think it's at the detriment. Tradition is so important to the Mounted Police and so important to an organization. I think if we lose our traditions, or if we don't pay attention to our traditions and keep our traditions, I think it's at our peril that we're going to lose the organization. When you look at so many things people admire about the RCMP, it's that we maintain our traditions, that wherever we are in the country or outside the country, we maintain it. We have that sense of discipline. And I think that's what sets us apart from others, that even our militaries say that sometimes the Mounted Police are more military in the form of their traditions, not in the form of their activities, but their traditions, their pomp and their ceremony. This is all very, very meaningful, and I think this is what attracts people to the RCMP, and I think this is what sets us aside from others. Other police agencies and other organizations, not just police, but other organizations. I'd sum my career up as to one where I've had a great deal of opportunity, a great deal of flexibility given to me by the organization, by the RCMP, and I think I've always thought that duty and service should be first. And some people say, well, what about family? And I think you can combine family and service together. You just have to make choices. And to me, it's duty, service, and honor, ethical behavior, doing the right thing. And I think that's what I've always tried to do in the Mounted Police. But I think first and foremost is how can you contribute to the community, to Canada, to the RCMP, rather than saying what's in it for me. And I think, I'm very fortunate. I've been blessed with a great career in the Mounted Police, but I never once thought I never thought I wanted to be promoted. I thought I peaked when I became a corporal. I thought that was the be-all, end-all. I was a corporal detachment commander, and life couldn't be better. And and I think most people, when they leave depot, all aspire to be a staff sergeant. And again, I thought when I became a corporal that was the greatest gift that the RCMP could ever give to me. And I had great years as a corporal and great opportunities. So, but I think again, it's duty, honor, and service to Canada and to the communities. When I became commanding officer of G Division, Northwest Territories, it was like a homecoming for me to go back there, to serve there as a constable and as an NCO in the division, and then to go back as a CO was a very humbling and gratifying experience, and very much an eye-opener too, to see the responsibilities that a commanding officer has and the interactions that they had to have with government and with different organizations and internally within the RCMP. But I guess the thing that really stood out for me, lots of things stood out for me, but when I returned to Aklavik, Julene and I, we went back to Aklavik. In Aklavik, we had spent 4 years there as a constable and as a corporal, as the detachment commander in Aklavik. And when I went back to Aklavik on a visit as the commanding officer, and we got off the plane and went into the community, and people greeted you as Corporal Ev or Corporal Summerfield's back. It wasn't the commanding officer, it was the corporal's back. So I think that demonstrates that the police in a community means so much to that community, and if you do a good job, they'll always remember you. And that was the greatest, I think, compliment that I could have, because I remember a previous commanding officer in G Division was Chief Superintendent Hugh Fagan. And when he came back to Aklavik, because he and his wife had spent many years in Aklavik, he was always referred to as Corporal Fagan, not Chief Superintendent Fagan, but Corporal Fagan. And I thought that was quite an honor to be in the same league as Chief Superintendent Fagan, to be referred to many years later as Corporal Summerfield coming back to Aklavik. So that's what really stands out. I mean, there was lots of great opportunities and great experiences up there, but and great accomplishments, because I think we had a great team up there. But that, from a personal perspective, meant so much to both Julene and I. Well, I think when you're faced with challenges, you should approach it with honesty and don't try and change. So often people change their approach to things rather than staying true to themselves and being themselves. And I think people see that. So I think you have to be true to yourself, and you have to be true to the people that you're responding to. So if you remain the same, respond in the same fashion, be honest, tell the obvious, or speak the obvious, speak from the heart, and explain things. I think there's nothing worse than people saying, well, we can't tell you that, when it's pretty obvious that that's what happened, or media lines and all of these things are very, very important to make sure that the messaging is proper and correct. But I think you have to be very, very truthful and not put spins on things. And that might be for some organizations or some individuals to do, but I think if we're honest and straightforward, and I look at most of the issues or challenges that the RCMP have had, those challenges come at a higher level. When you talk to the constables in the field at the front end of the organization, dealing with the public on a day-to-day, people ask them, what's going on? This is happening, that's happening, what do you think about that? They offer their opinion. I mean, I like to think the vast majority of members say it in a truthful manner. They don't offer maybe personal opinion, but they offer a balanced approach to things, just as they would in any investigation. And I think that's the key. Sometimes we don't allow, or we don't see what's happening on the ground. We're looking at it at a higher level. I always thought, in Ottawa, it's a different environment, and I never had the opportunity to work in Ottawa, but they're always talking about going downtown and doing this with the members of Parliament or different committees and different things, and all of that's very, very important. But I think we lose sight of the fact that all of those MPs come from somewhere in Canada. So the corporal on the detachment, or the sergeant on the detachment, or the staff sergeant has access to these members of Parliament all of the time when they're back in their home ridings. They have opinions. That's where they get elected from. So, I think, again, by ensuring that the story is out there and the true story, not one made up or that, but be truthful. And I think that's how we get through these challenges. And sometimes it's wiser to say nothing. And years ago, the Mounted Police didn't comment on things and let the public, defend us. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. But I think sometimes we're too quick to not say things that we should be saying. My first detachment, one incident stands out there. I had stopped the car in Frog Lake, and it had one headlight, or I think that's why I stopped it. It had one headlight, and it was kind of swerving over this gravel road. So I stopped it, and the driver was obviously impaired, drunk, but there must have been about 8 people in the car, all young people. They weren't teenagers, and they're probably 20s or 30s. And I had a police car, and the person driving had no driver's license, and they had switched drivers. I really didn't know who, but everybody had been drinking, and there was liquor in the car, and it was a mix of men and women. And I thought, what am I going to do with these people? I can't let them drive, and we're in the middle of nowhere, in the bush, in the forest, on a gravel road, on a reserve. So I said, I'll take them in the police car, and I'll take them somewhere on the reserve to somebody's house, because it was too far to go back to the detachment in Elk Point. So I tell everybody that they can't drive, and that their liquor's confiscated, and I poured out some of the open liquor, but the liquor that wasn't, I put in the trunk, told them that it'd be in the trunk of their car, and they could get it the following day, and had the car pulled off, or I pulled the car off to the side of the road. So loaded everybody up into the police car. So if you can visualize, about 8 people in there. I had 2 people in the front, the silent patrolman down, and the rest jammed into the back seat. And so you got a carload of drunks that want to play with the lights and want to play with the siren. And I thought, my God, what have I done here? I got a carload of people that are drunk. I'm by myself in the middle of nowhere. And at that time, my radio communications was in Edmonton, so it was 3 hours away. And I was the only one working that night. And I thought, my God, it's what are we going to do here? So, I let them play with the lights and the siren a little bit, and then we ended up in the kind of town site, and then deposited them at a house that would accept them all, and they partied on. And but thinking back to say, they were good people, they were having fun, but you think back and say, was this the smartest thing to do? But then again, at the time, what else do you do with 8 people in the middle of nowhere? So. But that stands out. And one other thing stands out for me was my second tour in Afghanistan was the fact that my son was, who was in the Army, the Canadian Army, we had the opportunity to serve together in Afghanistan. That stands out. That's one of the highlights. I mean, there's been many highlights in my life and certainly in my career, but insofar as a posting, that stands out to have had that opportunity to serve with your son in the same theater stands out. Well, I think a career in the RCMP would be, if you want to serve Canada, if you want to serve rural Canada, if you want to contribute to a community, and I think the opportunities are still there in the RCMP. There's so many different opportunities, and the Mounted Police is so diverse that you can virtually do whatever your interests might take you, whether it's uniform general duty policing or whether it's plainclothes detective sort of work, national security work, ride horses, you know, have a lot of outdoor activity. There's just so much that you can do, and you have the opportunity to serve anywhere in Canada that you might choose to accept a transfer and move to. So, you know, from a financial perspective, the RCMP are well paid, like all police agencies and first responders are well paid. Great benefits. Some would argue that the benefits are deteriorating, but you know, I think in balance, it's the financial reward is there, the career satisfaction is there, and if you want to serve Canada and Canadians, I think that's the area I think that they would like to do. And there's excitement in policing. Policing is boring, but I think there's a lot of excitement in policing too, and there's opportunities overseas. You know, that sort of excitement. There's maybe not like on TV, but certainly there's excitement.